The world ran on a symphony of synchronized beeps. It was a sound so ubiquitous, so woven into the fabric of daily life, that most people had learned to tune it out the way one ignores the hum of a refrigerator or the distant rush of traffic. It was the sound of timers counting down, a digital metronome ticking away the seconds until the most significant moment of a person's life, the meeting of their soulmate. Ava's timer was a sleek, silver band on her left wrist. For 28 years, it had been her constant companion, her source of anxiety, her beacon of hope. Its digital face currently read 2 years, 4 months, 12 days, 7 hours, and 3 minutes. A comfortably distant future. She had a plan, of course. Everyone with a timer over a year had a plan. She was going to get her promotion to senior art director, maybe travel to Japan, get her life perfectly in order so that when her second zero arrived, she would be her best possible self for her best possible person. The elevator in the sleek glass and steel office tower of Sterling and Finch Advertising was her own private capsule of transition twice a day. It was where she shifted from Ava the dreamer to Ava the professional, and vice versa. This Tuesday evening, it was particularly empty. The post-work exodus had dwindled to a trickle. She stepped in, the doors sighing closed behind her, enveloping her in a muted, brass-paneled silence. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes for a brief moment, mentally reviewing the disastrous client meeting about a new cat food campaign. The elevator chimed, slowing for a stop on the 24th floor. The doors slid open, and a man stepped in. Ava's professional politeness kicked in automatically. He was tall, with a slightly rumpled look that spoke of a long day, dark hair that looked like it had been repeatedly run through with anxious fingers, and he carried a worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder. He gave her a small, tired smile, which she returned with a tight-lipped one of her own before both their eyes dropped to their wrists, a reflexive, universal gesture. His timer was a more utilitarian, black model. Her brain, trained by a lifetime of social conditioning, automatically registered its countdown. 5 years, 8 months, 1 day for hours. A lifetime away. A pang of something, not pity, but a distant kinship, echoed in her chest. He was still deep in the trenches of the waiting game. The elevator resumed its descent. 30, 29, 28. Ava's gaze was fixed on the floor numbers, her mind already halfway home, to a glass of wine and her sketchbook. Then a sound, sharp and alien in the quiet, made her jump. Beep. It wasn't the soft chime of the elevator. It was a single, high-pitched, definitive tone from her wrist. Her head snapped down. The digital display on her silver band, which had for so many years held a complex string of numbers, was now a stark, blinding, and horrifyingly simple. Midnight. Second zero. Her heart didn't just skip a beat. It seemed to freeze solid in her chest. The air vanished from her lungs. This was impossible. It was a glitch. A catastrophic, world-shattering malfunction. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted around the small, confined space. There was only one other person. Him, the man with the 5-year countdown. He was staring at her wrist, his own face a mask of sheer, unadulterated confusion. He hadn't heard the beep, but he had seen her violent flinch. His eyes met hers, and in them, she saw the reflection of her own terror. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice hesitant. Ava couldn't speak. She could only shove her wrist towards him, the accusing zeros glowing like malevolent eyes. His gaze dropped to the display. She watched the understanding dawn on his face, followed by a wave of profound disbelief. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That can't be right." He held up his own wrist, thrusting it forward as if to provide an alibi. "Look, 5 years. I have 5 years." The elevator chose that moment of cosmic absurdity to arrive at the ground floor. The doors slid open with a cheerful, normal ding, revealing the bustling, marble-lined lobby. The real world, with its own symphony of timers, rushed in. The contrast was dizzying. Ava stumbled out, her legs feeling like rubber. The man followed, a step behind, his presence both a magnet and a repellent. "Wait, please," he said, catching up to her. "My name is Leo. Leo Walsh. I work in IT on 24. What just happened? Ava stopped, turning to face him. The noise of the lobby, the beeping of 100 different timers, felt like a personal assault. My name is Ava, she managed to choke out. And I have no idea. But your timer, it's still going? Leo looked down at his wrist. Yes. 5 years, 8 months, 1 day, 3 hours, and 59 minutes. It didn't stop. It never even stuttered. He looked back at her, his brown eyes searching hers, not with the romantic wonder the stories promised, but with the wary concern of a scientist discovering a fundamental law of physics had been broken. This isn't how it's supposed to work. Ava hugged her arms around herself, the zeros on her wrist burning into her skin. The plan, the promotion Japan, the best version of herself, lay in smoldering ruins at her feet. She had reached second zero, and she was standing in a lobby with a stranger whose clock was still loudly, defiantly ticking. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. Ava moved through her life like a ghost, haunted by the glowing zeros on her wrist. She became hyper-aware of every timer around her. She saw the joyful, tearful unions in coffee shops and on street corners, the synchronized beeps followed by embraces that seemed to block out the rest of the world. Each one was a fresh stab of betrayal. She had done everything right. She had trusted the timer, and the timer had lied. Her best friend, Chloe, whose own timer had synced perfectly with her husband's 3 years prior, was initially ecstatic. Ava, second zero. This is incredible. Who is he? Tell me everything. When Ava explained, the excitement on Chloe's face morphed into confused sympathy. Oh, honey, it's a glitch? Are you sure? Maybe his timer is broken. Maybe he's in denial. It's not broken, Chloe, Ava said, stirring her coffee with a violence that sloshed it over the rim. It's counting down perfectly. 5-point-something years. I'm his pre-soulmate. An anomaly. She avoided Leo, which was surprisingly easy in a 40-story building. She took different elevators, used a different staircase, and kept her head down. But the universe, it seemed, had a perverse sense of humor. A week after the elevator incident, a company-wide email announced a new cross-departmental project, a rebranding of the internal IT support system. The art department was to lead the creative. The lead IT liaison, Leo Walsh. Their first meeting was in a sterile conference room. Ava sat as far from him as possible, her portfolio a shield on the table in front of her. Leo was professional, quiet, his eyes carefully avoiding her wrist. But the tension was a physical presence in the room. Everyone else's timers beeped and whirred, a chorus of destiny, while the space between them was a silent, zero-shaped void. During a break, he approached her as she stood by the window, staring down at the ant-like people on the streets below. Ava, he said softly, we can't just ignore this. Watch me, she replied, her voice tight. My timer didn't stop, he insisted, as if she needed reminding. That means, according to every law we know, you are not my soulmate. But your timer, it says you are. One of them is wrong, or both of them are. But this is happening to us. Together. She finally turned to look at him. He looked tired, but there was a fierce intelligence in his gaze, a determination to solve the puzzle. What do you suggest, Leo? We go on a date? See if we can trigger your zero? Force fate's hand. I suggest we talk, he said simply. We're the only 2 people in the world, as far as I know, who are experiencing this. That has to count for something. Coffee. After work. As colleagues trying to figure out a system error. It was the system error that got her. It was so unromantic, so clinical. It felt safe. She nodded, a curt, reluctant motion. 1 coffee. The coffee stretched into 2 hours. They didn't talk about soulmates. They talked about work. He told her about the frustrating logic of code, how he found beauty in creating order from digital chaos. She told him about the struggle to translate a client's vague feeling into a tangible, beautiful image. He was sharp, witty in a dry, understated way, and he listened, really listened, when she spoke about color theory and negative space. It was the most normal, and yet the most abnormal interaction of her life. They started meeting regularly. It became their strange, secret ritual. They would discuss project fonts and user interface layouts in the conference room. And then, over coffee or a walk in the park, they would talk about everything else. She learned he was a fiend for terrible sci-fi movies. He learned she had an encyclopedic knowledge of 20th century graphic design. They built a fragile, tentative friendship on the foundation of their shared cosmic paradox. Ava found herself noticing things. The way he pushed his glasses up his nose when he was thinking deeply. The small, almost invisible scar above his eyebrow. The way he never once looked at her timer with pity, only with a kind of scientific curiosity. One evening, sitting on a park bench as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, the conversation finally turned to the timers. "Do you ever wonder what it was like?" Leo asked, his gaze fixed on a couple walking hand in hand, their timers a synchronized, silent display of completed destiny. "Before? When people just met." "All the time," Ava admitted, her thumb unconsciously stroking the face of her own zero-bound timer. "It seems more romantic, more brave, to have to figure it out for yourself, without a digital guarantee. Or more tragic," Leo countered softly. "Think of all the people who gave up too soon. All the ones who settled because they couldn't know. We've traded uncertainty for a promise. The question is, what happens when the promise breaks?" Their eyes met, and for the first time, Ava felt a flicker of something other than anxiety in his presence. It was a spark of profound, shared understanding. They were exiles from the system, two people adrift in a sea of certainty. The project was nearing its end, and with it, the official reason for their constant contact. Ava felt a strange panic at the thought. What would happen then? Would they just go their separate ways, this unresolved cord hanging between them forever? The question was answered on the night of the project's successful launch party. The office was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the ever-present soundtrack of timers. Ava had a drink in her hand, trying to smile, trying to feel celebratory, but feeling Leo's absence like a physical ache. He'd said he might stop by, but he was notoriously averse to crowds. She finally escaped to the rooftop terrace, seeking quiet. The cool night air was a relief. She leaned on the railing, looking out at the glittering city, a million lives, a million countdowns, all playing out simultaneously. She didn't hear him approach, but she felt his presence. She always did. Hiding from masses? Leo's voice came from behind her. She turned. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne. Something like that. He handed her one. "To a successful project," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "To system errors," she replied, a wry smile touching her lips. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city. Then Leo took a deep breath. "My timer hit 5 years exactly today," he said. "A milestone." Ava's breath hitched. "Congratulations." "It doesn't feel like a milestone," he said, his voice low and intense. "It feels like a prison sentence. Because all I could think about today, every second of this damn day, was that the 5 years standing between me and my supposed soulmate are 5 years I can't spend getting to know you." Ava's heart hammered against her ribs. The air crackled between them. The unspoken thing was finally out, hanging in the night air, more real than the city lights. "Leo," she whispered, "I know the rules, Ava. I know what my timer says. But I also know what I feel. And I feel connected to you, in a way that makes the numbers on my wrist feel meaningless. Your timer says 0. Mine says 5 years. Which one of us is right?" Before she could answer, before she could even process his words, he stepped closer. His hand came up, his fingers gently circling her wrist, his thumb covering the zeros on her timer. It was the first time he had intentionally touched it. "I don't care what this says," he murmured, his eyes locked on hers. "And I'm starting not to care what mine says either." He leaned in, and his lips met hers. It wasn't a kiss born of cosmic destiny or a synchronized beep. It was hesitant, questioning, full of the terrifying vulnerability of choice. It was a kiss that defied the universe. And for Ava, in that moment, with the cold metal of her timer beneath his warm hand and the taste of champagne on his lips, it felt more real, more fated, than any second 0 ever could. The kiss changed everything and nothing. It opened a door to a world of terrifying possibility. They began seeing each other in earnest, a secret they guarded fiercely. Their relationship was a stolen, precious thing, conducted in the shadows away from the judgmental beeps of the world. They were happy in a frantic, desperate way. They went to drive-in movies showing his beloved terrible sci-fi, cooked elaborate meals in her apartment, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. But the world outside their bubble was relentless. The pressure mounted. Ava's family, over a strange Sunday dinner, bombarded her with questions. Your timer hit 0, Ava. So where is he? Why haven't we met him? Is something wrong? Her mother's eyes were full of concern, her sisters with thinly veiled suspicion. Leo faced a different kind of pressure. His friends, seeing him happier and more relaxed, assumed his timer must be getting close. They'd clap him on the back and ask, so, how much time left? You got that glow. He'd have to lie, to mumble something vague and change the subject, the guilt a sour taste in his mouth. The real conflict, however, came from within Ava. The doubt was a cancer, fed by every romantic comedy, every news story about perfect time reunions, every smiling couple she saw on the street. Was this real? Or was she just a placeholder, a temporary comfort for Leo until his real soulmate arrived in 5 years? Was she sabotaging her own destiny and his by clinging to a man whose timer so clearly stated she wasn't the one? The breaking point came at a friend's wedding. It was a beautiful, picture-perfect timer ceremony. The bride and groom, whose timers had hit 0 simultaneously in a university library, exchanged vows under an arch of flowers, their synchronized, silent wristbands gleaming in the sun. The air was thick with the saccharine certainty of predestined love. Ava, sitting beside Leo, felt like she was suffocating. She could feel the weight of his timer, a hidden bomb strapped to his wrist. During the reception, a well-meaning elderly aunt approached them. "And what about you two?" she chirped, her eyes twinkling. "Let's see the countdown." "Oh, it's so exciting to see young love before the 0. Leo froze. Ava's stomach plummeted. We'd rather not," Leo said, his voice strained. "Oh, don't be shy," the aunt persisted. "It's a celebration of love. Let's see the numbers." In a panic, Ava blurted out, "Mine is at 0. The aunt's face lit up. "Oh, so you found him. And you, young man?" Her gaze turned to Leo, expectant. The silence that followed was deafening. Leo's jaw was tight. He slowly, reluctantly, pulled back his cuff. The black digital display was stark and clear in the afternoon light. For years, 11 months, 2 days. The aunt's smile didn't just fade. It collapsed into a rictus of confusion and dawning disapproval. "Oh," she said, the single syllable laden with a universe of judgment. "I said." She quickly excused herself, shooting a last, pitying glance at Ava. The ride home was silent. The happy bubble had been popped by the sharp pin of reality. Later, in her apartment, the dam broke. "I can't do this anymore, Leo," Ava said, her voice trembling as she hugged herself, standing by the window, unable to look at him. "I can't live in this limbo. Every day I look at your timer, and I see an expiration date on us. I see the woman you're supposed to be with, and I'm just me. The glitch. The anomaly. Ava, look at me," he pleaded, coming to stand behind her. "The timer doesn't matter. What we have is real. I choose you. Right here, right now. I choose you over some hypothetical future promised by a piece of technology." "But what happens in 4 years and 11 months?" she cried, whirling around to face him, tears finally streaming down her face. "What happens when your timer hits 0 and I'm not her? Will you just leave me? Will you have no choice? I can't be the reason you miss your actual soulmate. I can't live with that guilt. So you're going to preemptively break both our hearts because of a what if?" he asked, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "You're going to trust a machine over what you feel?" "I don't know what I feel anymore," she sobbed. "The only thing I've ever been sure of was my timer. And now even that is a lie. I need certainty. And with you, all I have is doubt." The words hung in the air, final and devastating. Leo looked at her, the hope in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a profound sadness. He nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict. "Okay," he whispered, "if that's what you need." He turned and walked out of her apartment and out of her life. The door clicked shut, and the silence that remained was the loudest, most painful sound Ava had ever heard. It was the sound of a choice made and a love sacrificed to the tyranny of a countdown. The weeks that followed were a monochrome blur. Ava threw herself into her work, creating brilliant, soulless campaigns. She went on dates set up by friends, men with promising timers, 1 year, 2 years. They were nice, handsome, and perfectly fine. And every time one of them spoke, she heard Leo's voice. Every time one of them laughed, she felt the absence of his. She was living the plan again. The promotion came through. She was Ava, senior art director. She was successful. She was empty. She missed his dry wit, the way he could make her laugh even on her worst days. She missed the way he looked at her, not as a soulmate promised by a device, but as a person he had chosen to know, to understand. She missed the feeling of being chosen. One rainy afternoon, she found herself cleaning out her closet. Buried under a pile of scarves was a small, crumpled receipt. It was from the terrible sci-fi movie they'd seen on their third date. Was that what it was? A date. He'd drawn a little alien on the back of it while they were waiting in line. She sat on the floor, clutching the piece of paper, and finally allowed herself to truly grieve. She had been so terrified of being wrong, of being the mistake in his life, that she had made the biggest mistake of her own. She had let the world's definition of destiny override her own heart. Leo was right. They had traded uncertainty for a promise, and in doing so, they had forgotten how to be brave. Meanwhile, Leo was facing his own desolation. He tried to go back to his old life, but it no longer fit. The logic of code offered no comfort. The countdown on his wrist, once a simple fact of life, was now a taunting mockery. He missed Ava's passion, the way she saw color and beauty in everything. He missed the way she challenged him, made him see the world differently. He missed her. He spent his nights researching, digging through obscure forums and scientific journals, looking for any other recorded case of a timer anomaly. He found nothing. They were alone. But the more he read about the technology, the early, flawed prototypes, the corporate rush to market, the suppressed studies questioning its 100% accuracy rate, the more conviction grew in him. The timers were not infallible. They were a guide, perhaps, but not a god. His own timer, the source of all their pain, was just a machine, and he was done letting a machine dictate his happiness. It was Chloe who finally broke through Ava's wall of misery. She came over with a bottle of wine and a no-nonsense attitude. "Okay, I've watched you mope for 2 months. It's time to talk," Chloe said, pouring 2 generous glasses. "You love him." Ava shook her head, fresh tears welling. "It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters." Chloe insisted. "Ava, look at me. My timer synced with Mark's. It was perfect. But you know what? The day after our second zero, he left his wet towels on the floor. A month later, we had a screaming fight about whose turn it was to do the dishes. The timer didn't make our relationship perfect. It just started it. We're the ones who built it. We choose each other every single day, timer or no timer. You were brave enough to have a timer that said 0. Now be brave enough to live with the consequences of that, whatever they are." The words struck a chord. You choose each other every single day. Later that night, Ava stood before her bathroom mirror. She looked at her reflection, at the woman with a successful career and a broken heart. Then she looked down at her wrist. The zeros still glowed, a permanent question mark. With a sudden, decisive movement, she unbuckled the silver band. She opened the jewelry box on her counter and placed it inside, next to a pair of earrings her grandmother had given her. She closed the lid. The skin on her wrist felt naked, vulnerable, but also free. For the first time since she was a child, she was not defined by a countdown. She was defined only by herself and by her choices. She knew what she had to do. The next day, she stood outside the IT department on the 24th floor, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She saw him through the glass wall of his cubicle, head bent over a keyboard, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked up, sensing her presence. Their eyes met across the busy office. The surprise in his gaze was quickly replaced by a cautious, guarded hope. She walked towards him, ignoring the curious glances of his colleagues. When she reached his desk, she didn't say a word. She simply held up her left wrist, bare and unmarked for him to see. Leo's breath caught. He looked from her naked wrist to her face, his eyes searching for the truth. "I was wrong," Ava said, her voice clear and steady, despite the tremor in her soul. "I was so busy listening to what the world, and what this," she gestured to where her timer had been, "told me was true, that I stopped listening to my own heart. My heart doesn't have a timer. It doesn't count down. It just is, and it belongs to you." She took a deep breath. "You asked me which one of us was right, your timer or mine. I think we both were. Mine was right because it led me to you. And yours is right because it's giving us a choice. A choice everyone else never gets. We don't have a destiny written in digital code. We get to write our own. And I choose you, Leo. I don't care about the 5 years or the 5 minutes. I choose you." For a long moment, Leo was silent. Then, a slow, genuine smile, the one she had fallen in love with, spread across his face. He stood up, and in front of the entire IT department, he reached down and unbuckled his own black timer. He placed it on his desk with a soft, final click. "The battery in mine died about a week ago," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "I never bothered to replace it." He stepped around the desk and took her face in his hands, his touch familiar and grounding. "I choose you, Ava. Today, tomorrow, and for every second after that. Timer or no timer." And when he kissed her, it was nothing like the first, hesitant kiss on the rooftop. This was a kiss of certainty. Not the false certainty of a synchronized beep, but the hard-won, powerful certainty of a choice made with an open heart, defiant in the face of a counting world. It was the beginning of their story, written not by fate, but by themselves.